Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 459. The Heart of Steel. Part 1. We headed back to Seoul right away. The first thing we confirmed was the safety of the industrial complex. We haven't detected any other strange phenomena after that event, said Aileen, currently in charge of the central situation room. The display panel in the room was showing the footage shot near the Pacific Ocean. A gigantic island was rising up from the part of the ocean close to the American continent. I had no doubt that this was one of the calamities I knew of. Back in the ways of survival, the master of that island was a very powerful upper-rank outer god. Our issue now would be whether it was the same guy or not. My mother? She's currently at the eastern coastline. Eastern coastline? The rise of the forgotten island has begun. As the system message resounded out, we witnessed the waves rushing in at the other side of the Pacific. An unprecedented scale of terrain alteration had occurred, so it was obvious that an equally incredible volume of tsunami waves would crash into the various parts of the world pretty soon. Naturally, the one to bear the worst of it was the United States. Quagagagak. Horrible screams of incarnation bodies resounded out, and the streets of New York were being swept away. Tsunami waves weren't the end. Using the waves themselves, the lower-ranked outer gods, the nameless ones, were rushing in, as well. These low-ranked creatures were flooding in unchecked, to tear and devour the American mainland. There was no time to ask for help, either. Almost half of the continent had disappeared in less than 30 minutes after the calamity began. 1 hour later, the whole of the USA was covered in a jet-black aura. The scale of this calamity was so great that the Dark Castle, or the Disaster of Floods, couldn't even remotely compare in the scope. Could it be that my mother? Aileen nodded her head and added something else. I'm not entirely sure if it qualifies as a good thing, but... Next up, the display panel switched to the eastern coastline of the Korean peninsula. As expected, the tsunami wave had reached this far, as well. Although the height of the wave was much lower compared to the one that hit America, and there were no nameless ones riding on it, a tsunami wave still presented an enormous natural disaster all on its own. Oh, the wind god of the heavens! As soon as my mother's yell came to an end, powerful gusts of wind exploded out from the folding fan she was holding. Pungbeak, who acted all stiff and uptight back in the Great War of Saints and Demons, was pulling his weight this time, it seemed. Even Jo Young-ran, who could be called my mother's right hand, was taking an active part in the event, as well. Great Fable, Shindansu, has begun its storytelling. Hongik must have been paying attention to this event, because the Shindansu's fable had planted its roots deeply into the ocean and was blocking the disaster by using the Korean peninsula's probability. While looking as if she just lost 10 years of her life, Han Soo-young muttered dazedly. Anyways, isn't that woman in the United States, too? There was only one person that Han Soo-young would refer to as that woman. Couldn't she have used her precognition to predict that? I was about to speak to you in regards to that, Matt. Even before Aileen could finish, the side door to the situation room opened up and a certain someone made her entrance. Confirming the visitor's identity, Yu Young-hyuk immediately reached towards the dark heavenly demon sword. We didn't come to fight, so stay your sword, conquering king. Her, Eye of Great Demon, vibrated brightly. They were the prophet Anna Croft and the Zarathustras she led. Asterisk. The alert has been issued 5 hours ago. Most have escaped to other parts of the world, but still, many failed to leave on time. Why didn't you ask us for help? We simply didn't have the leeway. And also, we couldn't fully trust the information gleaned from the precognition, too. It was the first time that such large-scale information on the future had gone through such a sudden change, so Anna Croft looked quite troubled just then. A sudden change in the large-scale information on the future, that would be a pretty good indication that even her precognition didn't possess any merit when it came to the final scenario. Han Soo-young asked as if she wanted to nitpick. What about Asgard? They finished the Great War of Saints and Demons successfully, so they should have started supporting you once more. Anna Croft bit her lip hard as her head dropped lower. She then muttered softly. They told me to abandon the USA. The final scenario was about to begin. Most likely, not even Asgard would have the room to dwell on the fate of some continent from one of the many planets out there. Because Earth wouldn't be the only planet experiencing the signs of the impending apocalypse. The coo-goo-goo-goo, exploding noise came out of the display panel. Gag. We are. The outer gods that captured the American coastline began howling out. I recalled the 95th scenario I experienced during the 1863rd turn. The invasion of the outer gods began sooner in that world line than ours. And soon, we'd end up in a similar state. Because that's the story the stinking Bureau wanted to see, after all. Does South Korea have any countermeasures? Still thinking about it. I heard that you secretly contacted a king of outer gods. It seemed that she was talking about the secretive plotter here. Technically speaking, we have captured him, actually. Anna Croft's eyes visibly quaked when she heard me. She didn't seem to be aware of that. In that case. Can this calamity be stopped through him? He's exhausted a great deal of probability, so that's not going to work. Besides, he's unrelated to this calamity. You know something, don't you? I didn't reply right away and simply held Anna Croft's gaze. One needed to offer up their information first if they wanted to learn something new from the others. That was the basics of information exchange. She must have figured out what I wanted from her, because she suddenly sighed out softly and began telling her story. I don't have a lot of info to give you. You can start with those. Firstly, the current locations for the Great Apocalypse scenario are a portion of the Pacific and the American continent. I already knew that. Applicable location is currently undergoing the Great Apocalypse. I confirmed a transparent dome being generated over the American continent as well as the whole of the Pacific Ocean. The nameless ones weren't allowed to leave outside the dome, it seemed. That was probably the extent of the probability the outer gods had been permitted at the moment. Secondly, the nameless ones can't be hunted down with regular weapons. Obviously, the weapons of the past don't work, and even the star relics from lower-graded scenarios are useless, as well. Actually, the display panel did catch the sight of several incarnations desperately struggling against the nameless ones. One of them was the owner of a pretty well-known star relic, but his axe failed to cut the flesh of the nameless ones properly. But, how? The flesh of the incarnation body ripped apart by the sharp fangs splattered onto the screen, causing Hai to frown and turn her head away. I didn't look away, but continued to observe the scene closely. Exclusive skill, comprehension, is activating. On the surface of the nameless one's carapaces, I spotted faint letters floating around. Yu Young-hyuk spoke up first. It's a stigma. It's not just any stigma, either. If it can stay in an uninterrupted activation like that, then it's already in the visualized fable stage. The visualized fable. Indeed, it was about time that such a level of probability would be allowed. Yu Young-hyuk nodded his head in agreement. Most likely, the king of those nameless ones must be a being possessing incredible defensive capabilities. The dependence of a king would naturally follow their boss's fable. Just like how the coma Yu Young-hyuk's, the dependence of the secretive plotter, had done so. The outer god that raised the island in the middle of the Pacific was most likely one of the 5 kings mentioned in the book written by the Recorders of Fear. The calamity of the Western world, the master of the sunken island. I spoke up as if to reassure my companions. Please, you don't have to worry too much. Upper-level constellations should possess weapons that can kill them. However, no constellations are participating in the battle. For sure, I couldn't see any constellations inside the display panel. Not even the common historical figure grades. We should start gathering them, then. I glanced at BU while getting ready to use my true voice. The channel was abnormally silent for some reason. Everyone must have seen that spectacle, yet there was not a single indirect message so far. It was possible that they were fearful of the king that hadn't emerged from the deepest part of the ocean. Zhang Haiyang. Our gazes briefly met and she nodded her head. If it was difficult to talk to constellations through the channel, then it'd be a good idea to borrow her powers. And a short while later. No one's replying. Not even one? But that was not possible. There were so many constellations in the star stream after all. The black flame dragon was the only one that sent me a reply, but even he said that he's too busy and can't talk. Did you contact Olympus? What about the underworld? I called them first, but no reply either. Something was wrong here. I could somewhat understand if it's the Olympus, but underworld should have replied for sure. Not only that, what about Uriel or the great sage Heaven's equal? Han Suyang next to me clicked her tongue and spoke up. It's obvious what happened. This is the true nature of the creatures called the constellations. Each and every modifier of all the constellations that cheered us on brushed past my head. There were so many of them, yet none wanted to help us? Meanwhile, Han Suyang continued on. Many constellations watched out fables. Some cheered us on, while some were jealous of us. There were variety of reactions, sure. And we earned lots of coins, too. But that's as far as it goes. You think the world was truly moved by our stories? Do you really think you have managed to change the star stream? I'm not that naive, but still. Constellations only subscribe to the channels that meet their tastes. They are no longer entertained, so they simply moved on to other channels. That's all. I couldn't be sure whether Han Suyang was right or not. Next location for the Great Apocalypse is Northeast Asia. Time remaining until the start of the Great Apocalypse scenario is 14 days, 12 hours, and 7 minutes. But I was sure that the planet Earth would go down the drain if they continued to avoid us. Zhang Huiwan asked a question. What should we do? Well, it's not as if I didn't foresee something like this happening. My words caused Han Suyang to narrow her eyes. You got something? If they are not willing to meet us, then we should go and speak to them, instead. Where will you go first, then? As I thought, it's the easiest of the lot, the underworld, right? I think you're probably the only person out there who calls the underworld the easiest. I ignored the smirking Han Suyang and looked at Zhang Huiwan. Asking for Underworld's aid was indeed a priority, but there was something else more urgent than that right now. We had about 14 days left. With the minimum effort, we needed to get the maximum possible result. We should regain our lost comrade first. What I was looking at was the steel sword hanging on Zhang Huiwan's hips. Soul of the character Yi Hyansong is in slumber. The after effects of the steel transformation 5th stage was worse than I expected, it seemed. We'll go meet the Master of Steel. The Master of Steel? Will someone like that help us? I nodded my head. The Master of Steel is a powerful constellation. Although he's not a myth grade, there's no doubt we need his powers far more urgently than any top tier constellations out there. How come? I don't have the time to give you a detailed explanation. For now, let's get ready to move. We needed an emergency hotline, as well as the minimum level of defensive forces, so Zhang Haiyang, Gong Pildu, and Isiolwa were left behind in the industrial complex. I felt bad about leaving them behind again, but after seeing their expressions, I got the feeling that I was actually doing them a huge disservice by thinking that way. When I thought about it, Isiolwa said something similar to that, didn't she? Come back soon. And leave this place to us. Them being left behind in Seoul wasn't easier of the two jobs. Just like how the story continued on, because there were things that hadn't been told yet. Asterisk. We got in the X-grade Ferragini immediately and entered the dimensional road network. Our coordinate was OZ7611. Resplendent stars of the star stream brushed past us, and tension gradually dyed the expressions of my companions. You don't have to be that tense, everyone. Just think of it as going out for a fun outing. Take it as an extension of that workers' revolution or whatever you called it. But, isn't it working hours right now? I'm saying this because where we're headed off to isn't that scary. Where exactly are we going? Well, as I've told you, we're going to the stronghold of the Master of Steel. Just what the heck is that guy's real identity, anyway? Han Suyang became too frustrated and shot me that question. It's more or less possible to guess the identities of other constellations through their modifiers, right? The prisoner of the golden headband is Sun Wukong, while the god of wine and ecstasy is Dionysus. But this guy, I just can't figure it out. And there was no info on him in the parts that I read, either. Well, if you're that curious, why don't you take a guess through the predictive plagiarism? You want me to use my ability on something this small? I shrugged my shoulders. I took a look at the faces of my companions, and not just Han Suyang, but everyone seemed to be really curious about who this Master of Steel could be. Zhang Huiwan asked me. Is he someone from a myth that we know? He's not from a myth, but well, he's a really famous constellation regardless. Actually, there's even a famous story that used his fable as its foundation. But, I don't think the kids know about it all that well, though. My words caused both Xin Yusung and Yi Gilyong to become dejected right away. Just before I could continue on, noises of explosions came from behind us. Those sons of bitches! Han Suyang, steering the vehicle, cried out in sheer astonishment. Shadows of battleships were cast on the rearview mirror. And it wasn't just one or two, either. At a bare minimum, there were dozens of spaceships giving us chase while scattering ether particles. Xin Yusung asked me. Aren't they from a nebula? Why are they attacking us? I couldn't be sure, but those things looked like fable weapons belonging to great nebulas such as Vedas or Papyrus. Yi Jihai frowned deeply and spoke up. Should I just summon my Geobuxian? No, don't. We don't have the time to fight them. Step on it, Han Suyang. We didn't have too much to go until our destination, anyway. In the blink of an eye, the X-grade Ferragini shot forward and crossed the dimensional road in a shiver-inducing speed. And soon afterwards, a new message popped up in the air. You've arrived in the coordinate OZ 1900. Along with the loud screech, the vehicle came to stop in midair. The place we arrived in was actually a train station of sorts. And that station was a small wooden house. I shouted out. Everyone, get out quickly. And enter that house. Almost at the same time as everyone filed into this house, the X-grade Ferragini exploded into bits. God damn it, I hadn't even driven it that many times, too. I confirmed that everyone was inside and closed the front door shut. Right after that, a powerful tornado was stirred up around the wooden house. The structure rose up in the air, before moving at a breakneck pace. I shouted again. Shut the windows and lock them. You think closing the windows will actually help? Han Suyang threw out a tackle, but she still diligently closed the windows. I spotted the Mystery Nebula reloading their weapons in the far-off distance. It was indeed an impressive spectacle to witness dozens upon dozens of battleships charging their photon cannons at once. An attack of that magnitude could probably blow up the Korean peninsula in one go. Yi Jihai urgently shouted out. A juicy, even if it's now. Don't worry. We're safe here. Suddenly, the entire house went through a geometric transformation. Its interior expanded rapidly, and accompanied by loud metallic noises, steel pipes suddenly began growing throughout the house. What the heck? Wasn't this a wooden house? Docking procedure will now commence. The house floating in the air was secured to something as the loud docking noises resounded out. And at the same time, the burst of gunfire rained down on us. The firepower on display here was enough to blow away a continent to oblivion. But then, an unimaginably humongous steel barrier suddenly grew around the entirety of the planet as noisy exhaust sounds resounded out. Streams of gunfire flying in crashed into that barrier and were extinguished without a trace. My companions carried this rather scared silly look on their faces from the sheer scale of the barrier as they all turned to look at me. The exterior of the planet we arrived at could be seen through the windows. It was a city glimmering in a silvery hue. The giant planet that reminded one of a contracting heart. Welcome to the Heart of Steel, Oz. The Heart of Steel, Oz. This was the planet where the strongest metal found in the star stream grew. Chapter 460. The Heart of Steel. Part 2. The ship's hull will now enter the stabilization process. Please be on standby. While listening to the system messages, my companions dazedly looked out of the windows. The house that got swept away by a tornado, and entering a brand new world. Surely, some of them should have realized what exactly was going on here. A juicy, this is that, right? That Wizard of Oz? Rather unexpectedly, the one to ask me first was E.G. Hai. You heard about it? Ing. An old friend of mine used to love a musical related to it. E.G. Hai was bragging a bit, but then her expression suddenly became gloomy. Zhang Huiwen noticed that and quickly took over from there. By the way, isn't The Wizard of Oz a relatively modern literary work? If I remember correctly, it was created in the year 1900, I believe, said Yu Sang-a. As expected of Sang-a-yoni. You really do know everything. E.G. Hai raised her thumb up. Zhang Huiwen carried on. But, that doesn't make sense, does it? This world is only around 100 years old, but... I heard from Hien Song SSI that the Master of Steel is a far older constellation than that. You're correct, Huiwen SSI. She was asking a valid question. All fables would go on to construct existences sooner or later. Yet the age of the fable in question that could have constructed an existence was too short, so it was only natural that questions would be raised. What do you think about the journey to the West? Pardon? Do you believe that the journey came about first, or the great sage was around way before that? That brought about the moment of realization to my companions. Does that mean the Master of Steel existed before that story? It might, or might not. What the heck? It was as I said. The ages of those beings that became fables would gradually get harder to distinguish as time went on. A constellation would start from a source fable, but even such a fable would minutely change as time elapsed. The ship stabilization process has concluded. Exit will now open. Well, we'll find out once we get there, said Han Suyang, as she lightly leaped out first. E.G. Hai and the two kids, looking clearly excited, quickly followed after her. Let's get going, as well, said I. The remaining companions nodded their heads and exited from this ship. If my memory was correct, the scenario of Oz mirrored the original novel's adventure. The house flown away by the tornado would arrive in another world called Oz, and the unfortunate one that gets squashed flat would be the Wicked Witch. What the hell is this? And that's when I heard E.G. Hai's yell. Yup, she must have discovered the witch below the house, then. However. Hey, it's a fake? Something was indeed crushed under the house. However, it wasn't an actual witch, but a doll mocked up to look like one. Its state was so filthy and neglected that it would be hard to argue this thing was once a witch. Han Suyang picked up the broken leg of the mannequin and asked me, "What is this?" I quietly studied the leg. The progression has changed from the original dot. The planet Oz from the Ways of Survival was a type of theme park. The visitors would follow the route of the original Wizard of Oz, which went along the lines of, encounter the Munchkins first, then after receiving different roles to play, travel towards the Emerald Castle. However, something was wrong here. The dwarves, Munchkins, are nowhere to be found. Yu Yung Hayok muttered quietly. It's somewhat different from what my master told me. I agreed with him. What was up with this view? The Silver City with bleak winds blowing through it was showing almost no sign of life. Something feels really dreary. Isn't this world supposed to be a fairy tale? Even I, a man who read The Ways of Survival inside out, didn't possess a whole lot of info related to Oz. It was introduced properly only once during the original novel, during Yu Young Hyuk's 999th regression turn. In the latter half of The Ways of Survival, the scene skips happened far more frequently, and stuff related to Oz got relegated to simple lines such as, "They went to Oz to get fable metal that could strengthen their weapons." It's a sad place, isn't it? It'd have been nicer for a happier story to permeate in this place. Lee Hyun-sung from the 999th turn said that. It still remained vividly in my head even now. This was where he awakened his powers and ended up inheriting the status and the will of the Master of Steel. But no matter how hard I looked, our current view was completely different from the original novel. Why? Was it because we changed a lot of the original storyline? This was none other than Oz. It was not one of the planets strongly influenced by the changes Kim Dokja Company caused. Shouldn't those fairy-like creatures gather around us to sing and dance while taking us somewhere? Forget about fairies, I can't even see a single fly, said Han Soo-young. The theme park's broken notice board was found discarded on the ground. It was as if we were looking at a closed-down amusement park. Still, the kids seemed to be really excited regardless. They stuck close to my sides and began muttering away. It's almost like a haunted house. We decided to follow the yellow road marked on the ground for the time being. According to the original, the Emerald Castle should be waiting for us at the end of this road. And sure enough, we did spot a tall green tower after walking for a bit. And a small city was built around that tower. An aged castle has been constructed at the place where all journeys come to an end, so we wish for you to willingly pay us a visit and remember our story. Somewhat poignant words were written on the entrance to the city. It was around then that Yu Young Hyuk suddenly spoke up. I shall act on my own from here. What? Why? There is an excellent blacksmith living among the dwarfs in this place. I recalled a certain sentence after hearing him. The Oz's metal is permeated with the most ancient type of magic, so. Indeed, Oz was the place of origin for the metal permeated with the oldest fable in this star stream. Even Yu Young Hyuk's weapon from the original was reinforced with the steel from this place. The greatest supreme sword reborn as the star relic after the Oz's metal and Yu Young Hyuk's fable were intertwined, that was the star relic he used in the latter half of the novel, Heaven-Shaking Sword. Of course, that was the story from the original, and the one to get reinforced this time around would be the Dark Heavenly Demon Sword, but still. Oz's steel is the strongest in the star stream. Securing suitable weapons is an utmost priority. After declaring such, Yu Young Hyuk didn't even wait for our permission and simply went on his way. Companions looked at me, silently asking if this was okay, and I replied with a simple shrug of my shoulders. Since I had multiple reasons for coming to Oz anyway, there was a need to split the group here. Also, the whole group wasn't really necessary to save Lee Hyun-sung. I spoke to Ji-hai and her brilliantly sparkling eyes. You should go after him, too. Don't you want to upgrade your battleship? Hell yes. The clearly happy Ji-hai quickly trotted away. Next up, I looked at Yu Sang-ah. Yu Sang-ah SSI, can you tail them for the time being? I'm kind of worried about sending those two alone. And also, the kids. I'm sure there are lots of things to sightsee around here. Let's go. Please hurry. The children held on to both hands of Yu Sang-ah and they soon disappeared towards the high street. Now that the noisy group had been split up like this, I felt a bit hollow for some reason. The remaining people were Jong Hui-won, Han Soo-young and me. Han Soo-young muttered out. So, only Dorothy, the smart scarecrow, and the cowardly lion remain. There were 4 members in the Wizard of Oz's main group. They were the protagonists Dorothy, Tin Woodman, the Scarecrow, and the Cowardly Lion. I spoke up. Since you went ahead and said the smart Scarecrow, I'm guessing that's you. Bingo. I won't ask you about the other 2. You're the Cowardly Lion, obviously. Thanks. While chatting and giggling away, we entered the center of the city. If this place remained as a theme park, such a composition could have been rather fun. Jong Hui-won shook her head while looking at us and strode forward without hesitation. A handful of monkeys hidden in the nooks and crannies of the city were glancing at us. It certainly didn't feel like a welcoming atmosphere. This world didn't welcome us or even bother to greet us. Forget about a fairy tale, the overall vibe suited a horror novel far better. Not too long afterwards, we arrived before the Emerald Tower. Han Suyong was the first to speak up. It looks like a magic tower. Well, an actual wizard is living here, so. Although, I couldn't be sure if he was still alive even now. We approached the entrance and knocked on the door, only to be greeted by a stiff, curt voice of a man. State your business. We seek an audience with the Master of Steel. No reply came back. The door remained resolutely shut. It seemed that I made a slip of tongue somewhere. I quickly recalled the ways of survival. What did they say in the 999th turn again? While I remained engrossed in my thoughts, Zhang Huiwen suddenly unsheathed her sword and spoke up. Return Hyansong Ssi's soul, before I split this damn tower in half. The status of an archangel exploded out from her entire figure. And just as the intense flames of hellfire started burning on the steel sword's blade, the door hesitantly opened up. The Emerald Castle is welcoming all of you. I wondered if this was fine, but since we didn't have a lot of time, I figured might as well. Han Suyong had found an ideal opportunity here, so she muttered in an impressed voice. As expected of our Dorothy. Shut up. I didn't come here to fool around. Han Suyong sneaked closer to my side and whispered through the midday tryst. Super scary. Is that the power of love? Zhang Huiwen was marching forward while her steel sword drew arcs in the air. She was originally a spirited person, to begin with, but seeing her like this, I couldn't help but admit that her current aura was indeed astonishing. I guess so. The interior of the tower was rather plain and boring. There weren't any eye-catching decorations to speak of, and only the most necessary items were placed here and there. It was like the inside of Yi Hyansong's military backpack. We walked for another 5 minutes or so, before a room resembling an audience chamber made its appearance. We opened its doors and entered immediately. Colorful spotlights came to life and a giant, silver-colored mask floated up in the middle of the chamber. A pair of hollow eyes were now looking at us. The Kim Dokja Company, is it? The Steel's true voice reverberated within the audience chamber. I immediately realized that this guy was the Master of Steel, the Fablegrade Constellation, and Yi Hyansong's backer. This mask was probably a symbolic item. That's correct. Pleasure to make your acquaintance. I'm guessing that you're the Demon King of Salvation. I nodded my head. The silver mask looked at me as if this whole thing was rather annoying. What is the purpose of your visit here? Going straight to the topic, is it? I thought that this was for the better. Please return Yi Hyansong's soul to us. We know that you have the ownership over it. That's impossible. Why not? His soul is required to maintain this planet. That was completely unexpected. I glanced to my side, only to discover Zhang Huiwen glaring daggers in my direction. I quickly followed up. I'm well aware that sponsorship contracts are usually like this, but regardless of what, Hyansong SSI is our comrade. I was under the impression that you liked our story so far. Besides, doesn't Oz possess more than enough great fables? Surely, there isn't a reason to use Hyansong SSI's soul as the power source? The fable of Wizard of Oz was famous enough to be well known back on Earth, too. Sure, the fame had cooled down a little in recent times, but this story managed to generate a shocking level of popularity throughout the planet once upon a time. It was that famous on Earth, so how popular would it have been in the star stream? So, the lack of a power source simply didn't make any sense at all. Even then, the Master of Steel remained resolutely stubborn. Chapter 461. The Heart of Steel. Part 3. If you really require a power source, then why don't we exchange fables? We can supply you with fables that can serve as useful replacements. I told you to go back. As I thought, something was off here. If it was simply about using Hyunsong as a power source, then there shouldn't be a reason to say no to my offer. I'm sorry, but we must take his soul back with us. The final scenario will soon begin. Meaning, this is no time for us to worry about your well-being. Fable, Demon King of Salvation, has begun its storytelling. I unleashed my status, causing the Master of Steel to speak in a bit of a fluster. You dare to oppose me inside Oz? Accompanied by a tsu-cha-cha-chut noise, sparks exploded inside the audience chamber. The Master of Steel was a fable-grade constellation, but when in Oz, his status would. I've been generous by receiving you lot, yet you be almost on the same level as a myth-grade constellation. Koo-doo-doo-doo-doo. The whole planet seemingly writhed about violently like a heart, repeating the actions of contracting and relaxing. Han Suyong stared at me with a pale complexion. Are you insane, Kim Dokja? Why are you trying to fight NC? I began unleashing the fables next. Great Fable, Demon World Spring, has begun its storytelling. Great Fable, Torch That Swallowed the Myth, has begun its storytelling. The main Great Fables started their storytelling and the audience chamber quaked as if it had collapsed at any given moment. I stepped across the violently rocking floor and walked forward. The Master of Steel shouted out. Step back. If you don't, I shall. Yup, thought as much. There were plenty of opportunities to subdue me, yet this Master of Steel only issued warnings repeatedly without actually doing anything. It was like dealing with the cowardly lion. I walked straight through the mask and advanced forward to reach the rearmost wall of the audience chamber. The Master of Steel was shouting something at me, but I ignored it all and simply punched the wall hard. In the next moment, the silver mask floating around like a hologram disappeared. Listen here, monkey. And I could see a monkey through the wide-open hole in the wall, shivering away in pure fear. Where's the real Master of Steel? Asterisk. A short while later, we managed to get some useful info from the monkey. Han Suyong spoke first. Okay, so. The Master of Steel isn't here. If you do this, the Master of Steel will. Switch off the true voice, now. It doesn't even sound like a proper true voice, anyway. Probably forgive you, said the now dejected monkey. It was likely that this monkey was a henchman of the real Master of Steel. I wasn't sure why, but this little guy was acting like a constellation in this place for some reason. Hang on, was it you who sent all those indirect messages until now, then? Why yes, that's right. However, I was accurately conveying the Master of Steelnim's intentions. You were conveying his intentions? My question prompted the monkey's gaze to shift towards a corner of the audience chamber. That was where we could see an altar with a steel sword stabbed into its surface to resemble a cross. I took an especially closer look at the exterior of the sword. Now normally, I can hear the Master's intentions through that altar. But lately, messages from him have stopped arriving, and I reached out to the steel sword. I felt a certain flinching jolt when I touched it. I had experienced a sensation like this one before. Although very faint, it was the same sensation I felt back when I came in contact with a different world line. Which meant that the Master of Steel was in existence from another world line. But that was not possible. As far as I knew, the Master of Steel was Tin Woodman from The Wizard of Oz. Could it be that someone else had appropriated that constellation modifier? While I was stewing inside my thoughts, Han Suyong asked the monkey. Does the wretched state of your planet have something to do with that? Well, some part of it, yes. But neglecting maintenance also contributed to the issue, as well. Every fable is bound to stagnate, after all. It has been a really long time since magic has disappeared from Oz, you see. Do you actually know how old the fable of this place is? Don't know. Tourists don't come to Oz anymore. It's already been over 3 years since the last time the monthly average visitor numbers reached double digits. The monkey's eyes were dyed in the light of vague reminiscence. As if he was recalling the glory days of yore or something. Once upon a time, Oz was the #1 theme park in the Star Stream. Zhang Huiwen frowned deeply. I don't want to hear about stuff like that. So, are you going to return Hyeonsung SSI's soul or not? Well, that is a bit, why not? The whole reason why we managed to maintain double-digit attendance numbers is due to Hyeonsung, that's why. What are you talking about? The monkey hesitated greatly before answering her. Have you heard the news that lately, the powers of all great fables are in decline? Powers of the great fables are declining. It's not just Oz. Many fables that constitute great fables have all entered the path of stagnation, similar to Oz's situation. But, why? A certain fable that has appeared in recent times has begun eating into the percentages of other fables, you see. The monkey raised its head and with eyes full of resentment, began glaring at me. I'm talking about you people's fable. Asterisk. In conclusion, we did get something out from the visit to the Emerald Castle. The monkey told us this. You can take Hyeonsung away. In return, please help us with advertising Oz. We asked how we could do that, and he replied like this. You'll find out when you get to where Hyeonsung currently is. And that was the reason why us, this trio, were standing in this particular place. At some distance away, we could see a Ferris wheel that no longer functioned as well as an ancient, decrepit carousel. It was the stereotypical site of a rundown, bankrupt theme park. There is no wizard in Oz. It seemed that was the name of this theme park. In a way, it sounded rather cool. My problem was with what was written below it. However, we have Hyeonsung. Hyeonsung Memory Experience Center now open. Find Hyeonsung's soul hidden somewhere in the Experience Center to win a cool, pre-selected prize. What the hell was the meaning of this? We headed to the ticket booth to find a list of prices waiting for us. Asterisk entrance ticket 4,000 coins. Asterisk free pass, 50% discount, 3,000 coins. This was basically telling us to buy the free pass. The ticket booth employee asked us. How many? 3. 3,000 coins per incarnation. 60,000 for a constellation. Did I hear him wrong just now? I became dazed after being on the receiving end of such cruel discrimination for the first time in my life. But then, Zhang Huiwen suddenly extended her hand in my direction. This counts as company expenses, right? We're on the clock, after all. Of course. Give me one for incarnation. She unhesitantly swiped with the company expenses card and entered the Memory Experience Center right away. I remained dazed, while Han Suyong stepped past me. Excuse me, one more in car, hang on. What is it now? There is a special discount category. I point * Constellation X Incarnation Couple Discount Coupon, now available. * This is a special couples discount coupon designed for those sponsors visiting along with their incarnations. Make beautiful new memories with your incarnation and enjoy sweet, relaxing time together. Han Suyong finished reading the notice and turned to look at me. I nodded my head, which prompted her to ask a question. Have you finally lost it? Even if we have enough coins, I don't have enough to spend in this place. She glared at me with seething eyes, and as if calculating something in her head, she counted with her fingers for a bit, and finally alternated her gaze between the price list and me. Eventually, she sighed grandly and asked. Fine. What will you give me in return? *. What are you two doing? Zhang Huiwen discovered Han Suyong and I, and said that in dismay. But, that was understandable. Because, both of us were sporting an identical pair of wolf ear headbands right now. Applicable item can't be taken off while inside the Memory Experience Center. Please show off the close bond you share with your incarnation to other constellations. Han Suyong replied to her in a shameless voice. I'm working part-time in the dating industry. Let's search for Hyeonsung SSI first, shall we? According to the monkey, Hyeonsung's soul should be wandering around somewhere in this Memory Experience Center. Not sure why he was roaming around in this place, but We had a little bit of time on our hands, so we walked around the Memory Experience Center with calm minds. I was wondering what exactly this place was, and we soon got to find out. Lee Hyun-sung, born as a healthy and big baby, weighing in at 5.4 kilograms. Lee Hyun-sung, 5 years old, rescues a friend from bullies. This was where we would get to experience his life. Only those holding the free pass can enter. The chamber's experience will begin once you enter. Will you enter? Does this mean we will get to experience the feelings of a newborn? Who the heck would want to pay money to experience something like that? This theme park seemed to be similar in nature to a generalized amusement park. We could enter individual experience centers to experience Lee Hyun-sung's life through either his eyes or someone near him. Jong Hui-won spoke up. I guess we really have become famous lately. Someone even came up with a thing like this, too. I'm kinda curious about that one over there. We became totally entranced and studied the various parts of Lee Hyun-sung's life. It felt as if I had really become a constellation. Hang on, I really was a constellation, wasn't I? Lee Hyun-sung, 17 years old, fails in his quest for his first love. Jong Hui-won stared at this particular center without saying anything. So, I naturally had to ask. Are you planning to go in? No. We continued to search for Lee Hyun-sung. His soul gave off a unique fable reaction. And we could definitely sense that particular reaction nearby, but Lee Hyun-sung, encountering the judge that destroys evil. After walking about for a while, we discovered several experience centers related to the Kim Dokja company. Pure Steel Lee Hyun-sung. With judge that destroys evil, he. Jong Hui-won's steps gradually gained pace. We diligently followed after her. However, we still couldn't sense Lee Hyun-sung's presence. We looked through a row of the experience centers and turned around to leave, but found someone unexpected behind us. It wasn't the guy we were looking for, though. A juicy? It was Lee Ji-hai, wearing a fox ear headband. And why are you here? Lee Ji-hai provided a short explanation after I asked her. The first part of the tale was about Yu Young-hyuk, Yu Sang-ah, the kids, and her heading to the blacksmith only to be told that the supply of fable metal had run out. The second part was about how they walked around disappointed only to coincidentally discover this place. And finally, the last part regarding how they just couldn't win against the kids pestering them, so they bought a family discount to enter. Eh? Family discount? What are you fools doing here? I looked back and sure enough, Yu Young-hyuk and his fox ears were standing there. He alternated his gaze between me and Han Soo-young before throwing out a question. Have you regained Lee Hyun-sung's soul yet? We came here to find it. Besides, what are you doing here instead of searching for the fable metal? The blacksmith was temporarily closed. Apparently, their supply of fable metal had run out. I could guess why something like that had happened. Perhaps it was related to the weakening of Oz's great fable. I saw Yu Sang-ah waving her hand from afar. I also spotted Shin Yu-sung and Lee Gil-young wearing headbands that reminded me of a dragonfly's wings. Yoni. Let's go inside that one next. That one? Oh my, that one's for over 18s, you know. Somehow, the whole gang had assembled once more. I figured this was for the best. Since it had come to this, searching for Lee Hyun-sung together could save us from further trouble. It was then that Jong Hui-won's voice came from a bit of distance away. Everyone, please come over here. We hurriedly went over to her side. And that's where we discovered a certain experience center with an especially high number of warning signs posted outside compared to the others we've seen so far. Asterisk, this experience center can only be entered by persons older than 18 years of age. Asterisk, after experiencing the possession, you might suffer from mental anguish due to the severe, harsh treatment. Asterisk, caution should be exercised if South Korean male incarnations wish to use this center. I looked up at the title card for the Memory Experience Center and spoke to the others. Looks like we found him. There was no doubt about it. The dull and slow-moving fable unique to Hyun Sung could definitely be felt from this particular experience center. He was inside this thing. I reconfirmed the name of this experience center Chapter 462. The Heart of Steel. Part 4. Hyun Sung-yi will do it right. Hey, it's still not too late. Tie the pet bottles to your legs and jump from the 3rd floor. Others eventually all serve, anyway. So it's fine. Come back after becoming a man. Those were pretty common advice given to someone about to be drafted, just like his life. A life too busy chasing after what everyone else was doing. Just like everyone else, he had to sing Private's Letter, and without a best friend nor a girlfriend to bid him goodbye, walked into the recruit training center. 53rd Trainee. 53rd Trainee Lee Hyun Sung, here. Lee Hyun Sung's early military life wasn't so bad. Thanks to his naturally tall height and well-built muscles, he even got recommended to become a commander in training, too. He would have even graduated the training course with citations were it not for messing up the commander's pledge repeatedly. Trainee, do you think the words of your training supervisor are a joke? He realized it from an early age that he was rather slow-witted. Didn't matter what it was, he learned it later than everyone else, and he was also rather slow in analyzing his situations, too. Even then, he managed to live on relatively fine, all because there were some people who appreciated his relaxed and honest personality. Unfortunately, there were no such people to be found in the army. Just why do I have to be paired with him in the buddy system? A big freaking body and nothing much besides. Lee Hyun Sung endured the trainee life even as he was subjected to various insults and ridicules. By the time he completed the training course, he became someone who could finish showering in 5 minutes or pack his sleeping gear in less than 1 minute. Not too long afterwards, the moment he'd be dispatched to a base had arrived. This was the moment he had been waiting forever since he got drafted. Giving away sweet tips to those about to join the army. Follow these instructions after you get to a base. Hot. 812. From the shoe inserts to use during prolonged marching, to being loved by his seniors after he got assigned to a base, the so-called sweet tips on the internet he diligently studied the day before joining the military was his only hope. His fellow trainees left one by one. He was the last one remaining. And the person to come fetch him was a person named Sergeant First Class Jong. A steel hat deeply pressed on this person's head obscured their face. You, come with me. While he rode on the noisy military truck headed to somewhere, Lee Hyun Sung thought about his life one more time. He thought about the next couple of years ahead, as well as the trials and tribulations waiting for him. His new army base was in the middle of a small mountain. And so, this would be where his army life would begin proper. He finished the simple registration process for a new recruit with the aid of a manager and headed off to the barracks. And the moment he opened the building's door wide. You must definitely do this. Lee Hyun Sung did exactly what the internet tip said he should do. Accept your newbie dash. If this was a regular army, his army life would have come to an end right there. That was, if this was the regular army base. As his duffel bag was flung in the air, everything around him slowed down to a crawl, like a slow-motion video. The bag slowly came undone mid-air, unwashed army-issue underwears, toilet papers, and soap he used back in the boot camp very slowly scattered in the air. Also, Lee Hyun Sung's own triumphant, confident face, filled with the hope of his upcoming army life. As this scene resembling a tragedy-filled movie played out, someone suddenly asked a question. What should we do? That elicited a reply from someone else. Nothing much. This is who Hyun Sung SSI is. In any case, let's accept this reality. The hardcore treatment last time didn't work, so this time, let's go with the promised progressive army concept. Stop being noisy and get it started already, Kim Dokja. Well then, let's start over again. And then, the scene began moving forward again. Splat. His duffel bag shooting forward, seemingly out of a cannon, crashed on the floor like a real cannon shell. The atmosphere became icy in an instant as if someone poured cold water. And the glares of his seniors belatedly stabbed into Lee Hyun-sung. Cold sweat trickled down his back. Could it be that he made a mistake? Right next moment. Sergeant First Class Jong grinned brightly and clapped hands. Begin your smile. Exercise, now. Ha 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 ha. Wow, now that was funny. My first time seeing such a refreshing debut. That prompted the seniors in the barracks to give him a standing ovation as if they were waiting for this moment. Rookie Nim, really well done. Wonderful job. As the sounds of hands clapping resounded out, Lee Hyun-sung grew even more puzzled, but still, his triumphant air returned. The sweet tip had been right. Sergeant First Class Jong spoke towards the soldiers. Young Hyuk-lee, you're his direct senior, so take good care of this guy. Understood. The noisy atmosphere continued on. In the meantime, Lee Hyun-sung discovered a senior tidying up his scattered belongings on the floor for him. His uniform was perfectly straight, the light in his eyes sharp and fierce, and his face was like a fine sculpture. His chest was home to the Army Service ribbon of Private First Class, and the name tag of Yu Young Hyuk. Ah, so this person is my direct senior. It was then, this senior's scary eyes landed on Lee Hyun-sung. I'm Private Second Class, Lee Hyun-sung. Your spot is this way. His stuff had been gathered up in the blink of an eye and was placed in the locker. Other seniors looked impressed as if they were expecting it. Newbie, watch and learn from him. Young Hyuk is our base's ace, you see? Just from looking at the atmosphere of his seniors, he could already tell what kind of a being his direct senior was. That perfectly set beret, that perfectly set bedding, it was as if everywhere this person touched sparkled brightly. If he could carry on his army life just like this senior. What's this? We have a newbie? It was at this moment that a cheerful voice came from the entrance. A man's face caked in sweat as if he was returning from a hard day's work was there. Lee Hyun-sung confirmed the rank of sergeant as the man brushed past him and he quickly performed a military salute. Loyalty. Don't be so tense. It's fine. The sergeant studied Lee Hyun-sung's face before breaking out in a grin. He then shifted his gaze towards Private First Class Yu Young Hyuk. Looks like our Young Hyuk's military life is about to get a whole lot easier now. He's already got himself a direct junior and all. The complexion of the man snickering away was far too pale for a soldier. But, why was this? The moment he saw this man, Lee Hyun-sung felt this sensation of the deepest corner of his heart ache a little. Soldiers confirmed the face of the man and shouted out. Sergeant Kim Dok-jun-im. Good to see you back from your hard day's work. Alright, men. By the way, why isn't Young Hyuk greeting me? Well, come back. Private First Class Yu Young Hyuk trembled visibly, his complexion ashen white. It felt as his scowl didn't form out of fear, but more like out of sheer rage, instead. Sergeant Kim Dok-ja shrugged his shoulders after observing his reaction, then spoke up. Welcome to our squad, Lee Hyun-sung. I'm Private Second Class, Lee Hyun-sung. Sir. This was the first meeting between Lee Hyun-sung and the squad leader Kim Dok-ja. As far as the former's memories were concerned, that was... About 2 weeks went by since he was shipped out. During that time, Lee Hyun-sung got to learn various things about this base. For instance, about Sergeant Kim Dok-ja, the de facto authority in the squad he belonged to. Got it? If that fool Yu Young Hyuk does something out of line, you must tell me right away. Private Second Class, Lee Hyun-sung. There's no such thing. Nope, listen. Such a thing will happen. You already suffered plenty of times, you see. I think I misheard you, sir? And then, Private First Class Yu Young Hyuk, who always stayed by his side and led by example, and also glared at Sergeant Kim Dok-ja every single chance he got. Polish your military boots this way. Private Second Class, Lee Hyun-sung. I'll work hard. Working hard has no meaning. The important thing is doing it right. Also, Medical Officer Lieutenant Yu, who periodically showed up to do health checkups. You have a bruising on your leg. Should I just have you discharged for health reasons? Private Second Class Hyun Song. I'll be fine. Then, should I stitch you up? I'm pretty good with needles. Then, Sergeant First Class Jong, who seemed to be disinterested yet also meticulous, and sometimes looking at Hyun Song with a saddened expression. How is it? You good? Private Second Class, Hyun Song. I'll do my utmost best. It's fine if you don't. You always try your best anyway. Everyone here, they all had something weird about them. For the sake of establishing the culture of progressive army environment. However, if he were to pick the strangest person out of them all, then all soldiers must read web novels during their downtime. Reading web novels is the alpha and omega of a productive downtime. It was none other than the squad commander, Captain Han. That's enough. It's your downtime now. All of you, read web novels. Lo. Yalti. That's how Hyun Song's dreamlike soldier life began. However, he had no idea. Currently, Kim Dokja Company is challenging the Memory Experience Center's I lost a shell by mistake. Applicable Experience Center's difficulty is rated hardest. Number of attempts to clear it is currently 3. He had no idea that this soldier life wasn't his first time. Asterisk. It didn't really need to be explained, but the total number of people participating in this scenario was 5. Yu Young-hyuk, Yu Sang-ah, Jong Hui-won, Han Soo-young, and myself. On a side note, the hidden scenario we got was this. Plus. Hidden scenario, I lost a shell by mistake type, hidden. Difficulty? Clear condition, incarnation Hyun Song is trapped in his own memories. Resolve his trauma and rescue him from his memories. Time limit? Reward, Hyun Song's return, possibility of acquiring main prize item related to strengthening of Oz's profile. Failure, acceleration of Oz's destruction. Plus. What a nonsensical scenario it was. The time limit shown as question marks already put us in a bit of spot, yet the clear condition and the failure penalty were even more disconcerting. Sergeant First Class Jong Hui-won no, hang on, just Jong Hui-won, asked a question. Sergeant Kim Dokja. Yes? Let's forget about the rest for now. But this, why would us be destroyed if we fail? There are 2 possible theories. 1, that's how low the Oz's profile has fallen, and 2, it could mean some kind of physical danger. Along with a boom, a slender ripple-like thing spread from the far side of the skies. I recalled the nebulas that chased us to this place. It was possible that they had begun their invasion in earnest. If that was the case, then we didn't have all that much time. Maybe he heard the rippling noise, Hyun Song and his pale white complexion quickly ran towards us from afar. Sergeant Kim. Yeah, Hyun Song. Looks like North Korea is attacking us. Nah, it's alright. Go take a break. Loyalty. Hyun Song seemed lost as to what to do next, but eventually headed off to the corner of the base and began practicing national military gymnastics exercise he hadn't mastered yet. Jong Hui-won watched him and muttered to me. Can Hyun Song SSI really return to us? I'm not sure. But we must try. This was already our 3rd attempt. The first try was a failure as many of my companions didn't know much about the army. I was the only person who served among our group, actually, and the second try ended up as another failure all thanks to Yu Young-hyuk's hardcore treatment. Yu Young-hyuk, forming a scowl next to us, piped up. Frustrating. Hyun Song must be put through his paces so that he can wake up faster. Have you forgotten about the events of Coincidental? We already tried that during our 2nd try. I can do better, given another chance. You should know better than anyone that's not true. You know that saving someone else is never that easy. This Yu Young-hyuk had gone through the 3rd regression turn, or, possibly even the 1864th turn. So, he should know it even if I didn't bring it up. Hyun-sung. The order of your exercise is wrong. Or, it's possible that he didn't know. Yoo Young-hyuk strode towards the frightened Hyun-sung in big steps. I watched the two of them doing the military gymnastics exercise side by side and murmured to Jong Hui-won. I think staying here for too long will be bad for us. Even Yoo Young-hyuk's acting strange. He is? He's never served in the army, yet he's adapting to it just too well. I watched Yoo Young-hyuk perform the gymnastics exercise with mere religious zeal. There was an event during the 144th regression turn where he wrongly received a transfusion of Hyun-sung's military fable and went insane. If more time went by inside here and yet another fable like Mad Soldier Yoo Young-hyuk was created in the process, then Jong Hui-won replied. Isn't it a good thing that he's adapting really well? Yes, he's adapting well, but the problem is with how poorly he's treating me, his senior in rank. The military nowadays have become really soft, I have to say. Back when I was in the army. Dokja SSI, you're just sour that Young-hyuk SSI never served, right? I mean, he was exempted, wasn't he? I replied to her in a calm manner. In any case, the situation isn't so bad if we exclude that part. Just by us being here, the planet Oz's profile is rising up, after all. Currently, a large number of constellations are paying attention to the applicable scenario. Maybe the rumor of Kim Dokja Company creating yet another bizarre fable had made rounds out there because visitors to BU's channel had increased. I couldn't be sure, but those nebulas targeting us right outside the planet were probably watching us right now. If they couldn't attack us immediately, then taking advantage of the situation would be a smart thing to do. Many constellations have entered the applicable channel. Planet Oz's fame is spreading far and wide. Brand new fable related to incarnation Hyun-sung is germinating. The strange thing was, the newly entering constellations weren't the people that I knew of. Uriel, the Great Sage, the Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, Gureo's First Sword, as if they were the tidewater receding away, all the modifiers I was glad to see were nowhere to be found. An ominous foreboding crept up in my mind. Did something happen to them? Portion of constellations are eagerly waiting for incarnation Hyun-sung's return. I need to conclude this scenario quickly so that I may get to find out what's going on, but... Is there really a need to clear it, though? Pardon? Jong Hui-won didn't reply and stared in Hyun-sung's direction. While under the guidance of Yoo Young-hyuk, he was continuing to perform the exercise routine as sweat trickled down his face. Maybe he got the order right this time, because Yoo Young-hyuk could be seen nodding his head. Hyun-sung looked elated. Character Hyun-sung is feeling happy. Because he always harped on about manual this and manual that, I thought that Hyun-sung SSI was a natural-born soldier. I agreed with her assessment, so I ended up nodding along. Hyun-sung's backstory wasn't discussed in depth within the ways of survival. The man named Hyun-sung, who lived and died by the rules of the field manual. But such a man was in reality, as far removed from those manuals than anything else out there. This world was where Hyun-sung's manual had come to life. Character Hyun-sung likes this place. Jong Hui-won smiled powerlessly and spoke in a sorrowful voice. In a way, taking him away from here could be us being greedy. Certainly, Hyun-sung might be happier by remaining in Oz. Instead of wandering inside the hellish scenarios, spending simple, comfortable time within his memories could be a better life for him. Goo-goo-goo-goo. It was then, we heard yet another deafening boom. Just as I was about to exchange glances with Jong Hui-won, several channel messages floated up one after the other. Constellation, demon-like Judge of Fire, has entered the channel. Constellation, Abyssal Black Flame Dragon, has entered the channel. Constellation, Gureo's First Sword, has entered the channel. All those vanished constellations had returned to the channel at once. Just before I could ask what happened, though. Constellation, demon-like Judge of Fire, is trying to warn you of. Su-cha-cha-chat. All indirect messaging within the channel has been restricted. The indirect message was cut off. I raised my head to discover Bu forming a surprised expression. Obviously, this wasn't her doing, so. In that case, who? Another boom spread out from the skies. Accompanying the noise akin to a giant drum being torn apart, the heavens far away began cracking up. Crack. Dokja SSI. Something was going wrong here.